The day my son got married without inviting me, I inherited $15 million, but I decided to keep quiet, to find out if he would ever truly love me. My name is Ana Ruiz. I'm 63 years old, and for the last 3 decades, I've worked as a mechanic in a small garage in a Midwestern town. I never imagined that a simple scroll through Facebook would shatter my heart into a million pieces, and paradoxically, make me a millionaire on the same day. It was a Saturday morning, April 15th, 2023. I was having my morning coffee when I decided to check social media, something I rarely do. My son Adrian had barely spoken to me in recent months, and I, like a desperate mother, was looking for any sign of his life through those damn screens. What I saw left me paralyzed. Photo after photo of an elegant wedding at a luxury hotel in Chicago. My son Adrian, dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, was smiling radiantly next to Patricia, his now wife. The guests wore expensive suits, the flowers were extravagant, everything screamed luxury and sophistication. But I wasn't there. My own son had gotten married without even telling me. I scrolled frantically, looking for some explanation, some comment that would justify my absence. Nothing. It was as if I didn't exist in his life, as if the 31 years I'd spent being his mother had been erased from his memory. Tears started falling onto my phone screen as I remembered every sacrifice I had made for him. After his father, Mark, died in that car accident in 2012, I became both a mother and a father to him. Adrian was just 20 then, studying accounting at the state university. I worked double shifts, Sundays and holidays, getting my hands covered in grease day after day to pay for an education I never had. I vividly remember the day he asked me for money for a master's degree in finance. "Mom, this will open doors for me," he had told me with those bright eyes he inherited from his father. I mortgaged my small house to get the $15,000 he needed. I never held it against him. I never told him how many nights I lay awake crunching numbers, wondering if I could make the mortgage payment the next month. But as Adrian climbed the corporate ladder, I seemed to become invisible to him. First, it was the excuses for not coming to Sunday dinner. "I have too much work, Mom." Then he stopped answering my calls regularly. "I've been very busy with important projects." Finally, our conversations were reduced to sporadic messages on WhatsApp. When he met Patricia last year, everything got worse. She worked at a prestigious advertising agency in Chicago. She came from a wealthy family from a suburb like Winnetka. The first time I brought her to my house, I noticed how she wrinkled her nose at my old furniture, my faded photographs, my hands permanently stained with motor oil. Adrian seemed embarrassed, subtly apologizing for the modesty of our home. "Patricia has very high standards," he had commented once, as if that explained why they were excluding me more and more from their plans. Her family is used to a certain level. Now, looking at those wedding photos, I understood perfectly what had happened. Me, the mechanic with dirty hands, the widow living in a small house with second-hand furniture, I didn't fit into the perfect image they wanted to project. I was a nuisance, a stain on their new sophisticated lifestyle. The phone rang, interrupting my gloomy thoughts. It was an unknown number with an international prefix. "Mrs. Ana Ruiz?" a formal voice asked on the other end. "Yes, this is she. I am attorney Michael Serrano, from the firm Serrano and Associates in Miami. I am calling regarding your brother, Charles Ruiz, who passed away on April 8th. My heart stopped. Charles, my older brother, had moved to the United States over 20 years ago. We gradually lost touch, barely exchanging Christmas cards in recent years. I regret to inform you of his passing, but I must also inform you that you have been named the sole heir to his estate. The estate is valued at approximately $15 million. The world stood still. $15 million. The irony was so cruel that I almost laughed through my tears. The same day my son rejected me for not having enough money for his new life, I became a millionaire. "Mrs. Ruiz, are you still there?" Yes, I'm here. Are you sure? 15 million? Completely sure. Your brother invested wisely in Florida real estate for decades. I will need you to come to Miami to finalize the paperwork, but I can assure you that everything is in order. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. I looked again at Adrian's wedding photos, his perfect smile next to Patricia, surrounded by elegant people who would never know who I was. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't tell him anything about the inheritance. I wanted to know if one day, without money involved, My son would return to me out of genuine love, not for convenience. The ultimate test had just begun. The next few days passed in a strange haze. While I was processing the legal documents to claim Charles's inheritance, I couldn't stop reliving every moment that had led to this estrangement with Adrian. It was as if my mind needed to understand exactly where I had lost my son. Everything really started to change after Mark's funeral. I remember that November afternoon in 2012, perfectly, when we returned from the cemetery. Adrian was 20 and had just lost his father in that terrible accident on the highway. I was 52 then, and suddenly I found myself a single mother to a university student devastated by grief. "Don't worry, son," I had told him that night as we ate dinner in silence. "We're going to get through this together. Your father would have wanted you to finish your studies." Adrian barely looked up from his plate. "With what money, Mom? Dad handled the finances. The insurance will barely cover the funeral." He was right. Mark had been the organizer, the one who managed the accounts, the one who planned our modest future. I only knew how to fix engines, change oil, and work with my hands. But that night, I made the most important decision of my life. My son would finish his university degree, no matter what it cost. The next day, I spoke to my boss at the garage. "Manny, I need more hours, Manny. All the extra shifts you have. Anna, you already work 60 hours a week. You're going to kill yourself. My son needs to finish university." His father would have wanted that. Manny looked at me with that expression only people who understand the weight of parenthood have. "All right, you can cover Saturday afternoons and some Sundays, but take care of yourself." For the next 4 years, I practically lived at the garage. I arrived at 7 in the morning and left at 8 at night during the week. On weekends, I worked until 5 in the afternoon. My hands, which used to only smell of soap on Sundays, now permanently carried the scent of motor oil and gasoline. Adrian noticed. At first, he complained gently. "Mom, I barely see you. You should rest more." "It's temporary, son, just until you graduate." But as the years went by, his complaints turned into something different, something that hurt me more deeply. I vividly remember his graduation day in June 2016. I had worked a double shift the day before to be free that afternoon. I arrived at the event straight from the garage, wearing my only good suit but inevitably with traces of grease under my nails that I couldn't completely remove. Adrian received his diploma with honors. My chest swelled with pride as I watched him cross the stage. All the sacrifice, all the sleepless nights calculating expenses had been worth it. But when we met after the ceremony, I noticed something in his eyes. Shame. His classmates were accompanied by fathers in elegant suits, mothers in expensive dresses. I stood out like a sore thumb with my modest clothes and my working hands. "Congratulations, Adrian," I said, hugging him tightly. "Your father would be so proud." "Thanks, Mom," he replied. But his hug was brief, almost forced. That was the first visible crack in our relationship. When Adrian got his first job at an accounting firm in Chicago, I hoped things would get better. I thought that with his own salary, we could spend more time together without the constant financial pressure. I was completely wrong. His first salary was $1,800 a month. For me, who earned $1,200 working 60 hours a week, it seemed like a fortune. But for Adrian, who now worked surrounded by professionals with new cars and designer clothes, it was just the beginning. "Mom, I need to buy a new suit for work," he had told me one afternoon in September 2016. "Clients expect a certain level of presentation. How much does it cost?" $400. It's an investment in my career. $400, almost half of my monthly salary, but I gave it to him without hesitation. Then it was a used, but presentable, car. "I can't keep taking the subway to work, Mom. The partners at the firm have expectations. $5,000 that I got by taking out a personal loan." Then came the master's degree I mentioned before. $15,000 that I financed by mortgaging our house. With every investment in his future that I financed, Adrian seemed to drift further away from me. It was as if my money was welcome, but my presence became increasingly uncomfortable for him. The turning point came in 2019, when Adrian was promoted to supervisor at his company. His salary rose to $3,000 a month, and for the first time in years, he stopped asking me for money. He also stopped visiting me regularly. "I'm very busy with new responsibilities, Mom," he would justify when I called to invite him to dinner. "You know how it is in the corporate world." No, I didn't know. I only knew the world of fixing cars, of working with my hands, of coming home exhausted but satisfied with a job well done. Our conversations became superficial, scheduled. A weekly 15-minute phone call where he told me about important projects that I didn't fully understand, and I would tell him about the garage and the neighbors he no longer remembered. When he met Patricia in 2022, everything got exponentially worse. The first time he introduced her to me was at an elegant restaurant in downtown Chicago. "Mom, I want you to meet Patricia." She was a beautiful woman, no doubt. Blonde hair, perfectly styled, clothes that screamed money, impeccable manners. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at me, a cold, calculating assessment that immediately put me on guard. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Ruiz," she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Adrian has told me so much about you." What he didn't tell her, but what I understood perfectly that night, was that nothing she had heard had impressed her favorably. During dinner, Patricia dominated the conversation, talking about her job at the advertising agency, her trips to Europe, her plans to buy an apartment in an exclusive area of Chicago. I listened in silence, feeling more and more like an intruder in my own son's life. "And what do you do, Mrs. Ruiz?" she finally asked, although her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "I'm a mechanic," I replied simply. "Ah," an awkward pause. "How interesting." Adrian shifted nervously in his chair. "Mom owns her own garage," he lied smoothly. "I was an employee, not the owner, and we both knew it." That night, walking back to my old car parked 3 blocks from the restaurant because I didn't want to pay for parking, I knew I had lost my son for good. Patricia had become his new world, and that world had no place for a mechanic from a small town with calloused hands and second-hand clothes. Now, looking again at those wedding photos where I didn't exist, I understood that all those years of sacrifice had paradoxically created the distance that separated us. By giving him the education and opportunities I never had, I had created a son who was ashamed of his origins. But I had $15 million waiting for me in Miami, and a plan that would test if there was anything left of the little boy who once hugged me every night before bed. On Tuesday, April 18, 2023, 3 days after discovering Adrian's wedding on Facebook, I was organizing the documents that Attorney Serrano had emailed me from Miami when I heard the doorbell ring. It was 9:30 at night, an unusual time for visitors. When I opened the door, I froze. There stood Adrian, but not the successful, confident Adrian I had seen in the wedding photos. This was a broken man. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, his shirt was wrinkled, and in his trembling hands he held a yellow envelope that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. Can I come in?" It was the first time he had come to my house without calling first in over 2 years. For a moment, my heart filled with hope. Maybe he had thought about the wedding, maybe he was here to apologize, to explain why I hadn't been invited. "Of course, son, come in." He collapsed onto the living room sofa, as if his legs could no longer support him. The yellow envelope fell to the floor with a dull thud that echoed in the tense silence of the room. "Adrian, what happened? You look terrible." He looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen since the day of his father's funeral, pure, absolute desperation. "Patricia's gone," he murmured. "She left. With everything." "What do you mean, with everything?" He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. "I woke up Monday morning, and she wasn't there. I thought she'd left early for work, but when I got home in the afternoon, she was gone. All her clothes, her jewelry, her documents, as if she never existed. My maternal instincts kicked in immediately, but a part of me remained cautious. After 3 years of being practically ignored, of being excluded from his wedding, his sudden appearance felt suspicious. "I'm sure it's temporary, Adrian. Couples have problems. Maybe she needed some space after the wedding." "No, Mom, you don't understand." He bent down to pick up the yellow envelope from the floor. "This arrived this morning by special delivery." He handed me the envelope with visibly shaking hands. Inside was an official letter from Bank of America and several documents I immediately recognized as loan agreements. I began to read the letter out loud. "Dear Mr. Ruiz, we are writing to inform you that the personal loans taken out in your name, totaling $850,000, have gone into default. According to our records, you personally guaranteed these loans on—" My voice faded. $850,000. A sum so astronomical my mind refused to fully process it. "Did you sign this?" "Never!" Adrian shouted, jumping up from the sofa. I've never seen these documents in my life. But look at the signatures, Mom. Look at the dates. I examined the papers more closely. There were indeed multiple signatures that, while not exactly matching the handwriting I knew, were similar enough to fool a bank clerk. The dates spanned the last 8 months, coinciding perfectly with his intense relationship with Patricia. This woman, she had access to your personal documents. We'd been living together for 6 months, Mom. Of course she had access to everything. My driver's license, my passport, my bank statements. I trusted her completely. We were getting married. The irony of the situation hit me like a hammer. My son, who had excluded me from his wedding because he considered me unfit for his new sophisticated life, had been scammed by the very woman who represented everything I supposedly was not. Have you talked to the police? I went this morning to file a report, but the inspector explained that these cases are very complex. Patricia knew my routines perfectly. She had copies of my keys, access to my email. Legally, we were technically domestic partners. The banks have documentation that appears legitimate. He sank back onto the sofa, completely defeated. But there's more, Mom. Much more. He took out his cell phone and showed me the screen of his banking app. His checking account balance showed negative $32. The savings account was completely empty. Patricia had authorization to access our joint accounts. On Friday afternoon, while I was at work, she withdrew all the money we had saved for the honeymoon and initial marriage expenses. $300,000 that disappeared in transfers to overseas accounts. $300,000. A sum that represented more than I had earned in 10 years of work at the garage. How did you save up so much money? For the first time since he had arrived, Adrian looked me directly in the eyes with an expression of deep guilt. Patricia had contacts in the financial world. She convinced me to take out loans to invest in high-yield products. She said her cousin worked at an investment fund in Switzerland and could guarantee us returns of 15% annually. My heart sank. My son, with all his university education and accounting experience, had fallen for one of the oldest scams in the book. Adrian, that sounds like a classic pyramid scheme. I know that now, he whispered. But Patricia was so convincing, so self-assured. She showed me documents, references. She even introduced me to her supposed cousin on a video call. Everything seemed legitimate. The room fell into a heavy silence. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock that Mark had bought over 20 years ago, marking every second of this conversation that was changing everything between us. What are you going to do now? I don't know, Mom. The bank has given me 15 days to present a payment plan, or they will proceed to seize all my assets. My apartment, my car, my bank account, everything is at risk. I looked at my shattered son, the man who 3 days earlier had considered me too humble for his elegant wedding, and I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pain for seeing him suffer, anger for how he had treated me, but also a strange opportunity that fate had presented. In my pocket was the phone where I kept the emails from Attorney Serrano, confirming an inheritance of $15 million. I could solve all of Adrian's problems with a single phone call, but something stopped me. I wanted to know if this moment of crisis would reveal the son I remembered, or if he was simply here because he needed money and I was his only desperate option. Adrian, I said finally, before we talk about solutions, I need to ask you something very important. He raised his head, his eyes filled with a mix of expectation and terror. Why wasn't I invited to your wedding? The color drained from his face. It was the question he had been avoiding, the conversation he knew we would eventually have. Mom, Don't lie to me, son. After everything that's happened, I deserve the truth. Adrian closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, I saw for the first time in years the honest boy I had raised. Because I was ashamed of you, he whispered. Patricia and her family have a different social status. I thought your presence, our humble past, would ruin the image we had built. He had finally said the truth, the words we both knew but had never been spoken aloud. Surprisingly, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange sense of relief. Now I knew exactly where we stood. Thank you for your honesty, Adrian. Can you forgive me, Mom? I looked at him for a long moment. This 1-year-old man who had lost everything, chasing a life he thought would make him happy. That depends on what we do from now on. For the first time since he had arrived, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. But I had my own plans, and this crisis would be the ultimate test of whether my son could truly redeem himself. Over the next few minutes, Adrian began to tell me the whole story with a desperation I had never seen in him. It was as if the floodgates of years of secrets and lies had finally burst open. "It all started 8 months ago, when Patricia introduced me to her social circle," he began, wiping tears with the back of his hand. "They were successful people, Mom. Entrepreneurs, investors, people who handled amounts of money I couldn't even imagine." He got up from the sofa and started pacing nervously around the living room, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Patricia would host elegant dinners at her apartment. I felt completely out of place at first. They talked about real estate investments in Dubai, venture capital funds, financial opportunities that generated fortunes overnight. I remained silent, letting him continue. It was important that he told me everything before I made any decision. One night in September, Patricia took me aside after one of those dinners. She said, "Adrian, my cousin Daniel has an incredible proposal for us, but we need to invest at least $200,000 to get into the fund." $200,000? I interrupted. "Adrian, you didn't have that kind of money." Exactly what I told her, but she already had the solution prepared. His voice turned bitter. She explained that we could use my impeccable credit history to apply for bank loans. "It's virtual money," she would say. "We use it to invest, get 15% annual returns, pay off the loans, and keep the difference." My son's naivety hurt me physically. All those hours I had worked to pay for his higher education, and he had fallen into the most basic financial trap that existed. "And you agreed?" I resisted at first, but Patricia was so persuasive, so sure of herself. She showed me documents from her cousin's investment fund, performance certificates from previous years, testimonials from other investors who had multiplied their money. He stopped in front of the window, looking out at the dark street. "Besides, there was another factor, Mom. I wanted to impress her. I wanted to show her I could live up to her sophisticated world." "So you started taking out loans." "The first one was for $50,000 in October. Patricia came with me to the bank, elegantly dressed, acting as my financial advisor. The bank officer was impressed with our presentation. We showed income projections, business plans that Patricia had meticulously prepared. Adrian returned to the sofa, burying his head in his hands again. The money disappeared immediately into that supposed investment, but Patricia constantly reassured me. "Investment funds need time to generate returns," she would explain. "Daniel says we'll start seeing significant profits in 6 months. And you kept taking out more loans?" "In November, another $100,000. In January, $200,000 more. Every time." Patricia had perfect justifications. "Daniel is offering us an exclusive opportunity to double our initial investment. Or, there's a real estate project in Marbella that needs urgent financing." The scale of the scam was beginning to take shape in my mind. This woman had systematically manipulated my son for months, building such an elaborate web of lies that even someone with an accounting background had fallen for it completely. "You never suspected anything?" There were moments. His voice broke slightly. "In February, when we had been investing for 4 months and hadn't seen a single dollar in return, I started asking Patricia for the fund's account statements. And what did she say? She always had perfect excuses. Regulatory issues in Switzerland, government audits, international market fluctuations. And to reassure me, she would set up video calls with her cousin Daniel. Adrian took out his phone and showed me the call history. Indeed, there were dozens of video calls logged with a contact named Daniel Investment Fund. This guy seemed completely legitimate, Mom. He had an impressive office in the background. He spoke with sophisticated financial terminology. He sent me detailed monthly reports of our supposed earnings. Reports of earnings? Yes. According to the documents I received each month, our initial investment of $350,000 had grown to nearly $500,000 by March. I was ecstatic, Mom. I thought I had finally found a way to secure our financial future. The cruel irony of the situation hit me again. While I was keeping quiet about a real inheritance of $15 million, my son was celebrating fictitious gains of $150,000. When did you really start to suspect? 3 weeks ago, when we decided we wanted to withdraw some money to finance the wedding. Patricia had insisted on a costly celebration, and we needed immediate liquidity. He got up again, walking towards the kitchen. I followed him, noticing how his hands trembled as he poured himself a glass of water. When I asked Daniel to transfer $100,000 to our checking account, the really elaborate excuses began. Technical problems with the Swiss banking system, government regulations requiring additional documentation, mandatory lockup periods for high-yield investments. But you kept believing him. Patricia convinced me it was normal in the world of international investments. Big investors always face these bureaucratic hurdles, she would say. She suggested we take out another temporary loan to cover the wedding expenses and that we would pay it back immediately when the money from Switzerland became available. There it was, the last loan, the $300,000 that had disappeared from their bank accounts the previous Friday. And you never questioned why Patricia had so much financial knowledge for someone who supposedly worked in advertising? Adrian leaned against the kitchen doorframe, completely defeated. Now that you mention it, I never really saw her work. She was always available for investment meetings, for trips to meet with Daniel, to manage our supposed businesses. When I asked her about her job at the ad agency, her answers were vague. She always changed the subject to our financial plans. Have you tried contacting her family? Yesterday I drove to the suburb, to the address I had for her parents. His voice became barely a whisper. The house is empty, Mom. The neighbors told me they had never known any family by that name at that address. Apparently, the house has been vacant for 6 months. The full scope of the scam was beginning to reveal itself. This woman hadn't just stolen money. She had built a completely fictitious identity, an entire life designed to hook victims like my son. Adrian, do you realize she probably isn't even named Patricia? I know now. But I was so in love, so blinded by the possibility of a better life, that I didn't see the obvious signs. We returned to the living room in silence. Adrian collapsed onto the sofa again, staring at the bank documents scattered on the coffee table as if they were death sentences. Mom, I have nowhere to turn. My supposed friends from Patricia's social circle have also disappeared. My boss at the consulting firm has already warned me that if my financial situation becomes public, it could affect my job. The banks are threatening me with legal action. I sat across from him, watching this broken man who days before had considered me unfit for his new life. The boy I had raised with so much sacrifice had made terrible mistakes, but he was still my son. Adrian, before we talk about solutions, I need you to understand something very clearly. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and terror. This situation is going to require consequences, not just financial, but personal. If I decide to help you, things are going to change radically between us. Are you prepared for that? I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. Whatever it takes. I knew this was the crucial moment. I had the power to save my son, but also the opportunity to teach him lessons he should have learned years ago. The $1.5 million inheritance was still my secret, and my next decision would determine if Adrian would ever see me as anything more than an ATM again. The next day, while Adrian slept in his old room for the first time in 3 years, I made a decision that would change the course of this whole story. I wouldn't reveal the inheritance yet, but I wouldn't let him sink completely either. I needed to thoroughly investigate what had really happened before taking any definitive steps. At 8 a.m., I called my neighbor and lifelong friend, Raphael, who had retired as a criminal lawyer after 30 years defending complex cases. Raphael, I need your help with something urgent. Anna, of course. What's wrong? It's about Adrian. He's been the victim of a very sophisticated scam, and I need someone with experience to look at the situation before it's too late. Raphael arrived at my house an hour later. He was a 8-year-old man, gray-haired but with a mind as sharp as a razor, who had seen all kinds of fraud during his career. Tell me exactly what happened, he said, as he settled at my dining table. I explained the whole situation: Patricia's disappearance, the fraudulent loans, the $850,000 debt, the emptied bank accounts. Raphael took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting me to ask specific questions. Do you have any pictures of this woman? I went up to wake Adrian, who came down with swollen eyes and wrinkled clothes. Raphael questioned him for 2 hours, as if he were a witness in a trial, but with the gentleness of someone who understood he was dealing with a victim, not a criminal. Adrian, I need you to show me all communications you had with Patricia and with this supposed cousin Daniel. Emails, WhatsApp messages, contracts, everything. My son handed over his cell phone and personal laptop. Raphael began to examine everything with the thoroughness of a seasoned detective. This is fascinating, he muttered after an hour of reviewing the devices. Anna, your son has been the victim of what we call an organized romance scam, but at a level of sophistication we rarely see. What does that mean? Raphael turned the laptop screen towards us, showing a series of WhatsApp messages between Adrian and Patricia. Look at the timestamps on these messages. Patricia responded constantly, 24 hours a day, as if he were her only focus. But if you analyze the writing patterns and response frequency, it's likely there was a whole team managing this identity. He pointed to several specific messages. Here, for example, Patricia responds in perfect English, but with grammatical structures that suggest English is not her native language. And here, 3 hours later, she responds with completely American expressions. Adrian turned pale. Are you saying Patricia wasn't just one person? It's possible. The most sophisticated romance scams use entire teams. Someone handles the romantic personality, another handles the financial aspects, a third provides the technical knowledge about investments. Raphael continued browsing through the files. But the most interesting part is here. He opened a folder called Daniel Documents and began examining the supposed financial reports Adrian had received monthly. These documents are incredibly well forged. Professional logos, consistent reference numbers, even verification codes that look authentic. But there's a revealing detail. He enlarged a section of one of the reports. See this Swiss bank account number? It ends in 4,847. Now look at this other report from the following month. The same number, but now it ends in 4,274. A small mistake, I observed. Exactly. Professional criminals are meticulous, but when they're handling multiple victims simultaneously, they make tiny mistakes like this. It's proof that this wasn't an operation specifically targeting Adrian, but part of a larger network. Raphael closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. What are the legal options? I asked. Complicated. Patricia, or whatever her real name is, has been extremely careful. Technically, Adrian signed documents giving her access to the bank accounts. The loans, although likely obtained through forged signatures, will be very difficult to dispute without expensive forensic evidence. And internationally? That's where it gets interesting. Raphael opened his own laptop and started typing quickly. I have contacts at Interpol from my years as a criminal lawyer. Let me make some inquiries. Over the next few minutes, Raphael exchanged several emails and made 3 phone calls in fluent Spanish that I didn't know he spoke. Anna, I think we're in luck. An inspector I worked with on international cases confirms they've been tracking a network of romance scams operating between Spain, Argentina, and Colombia. Argentina and Colombia? Yes, the pattern is always the same. Attractive women who integrate into wealthy social circles, establish romantic relationships with successful professional men, and then convince them to make fraudulent investments before disappearing. Adrian sat up straight for the first time since this nightmare began. Is there any chance of recovering the money? Some, but it will require time, resources, and above all, patience. International procedures are slow and expensive. Raphael looked at me directly. Anna, I need to ask you something delicate. Do you have the financial resources to hire the legal representation this case will need? We're talking about at least $50,000 in fees and procedural expenses. It was the moment I had been waiting for. I could reveal the inheritance now, but something held me back. I wanted to see how far Adrian was willing to go to fix his mistake and how much he had truly learned from this experience. Raphael, give me 24 hours to evaluate my financial options. In the meantime, what can we do to protect Adrian from the banks? We can request a temporary suspension of collection proceedings by filing the criminal complaint. If we prove the loans were obtained fraudulently, the bank will have to wait until the investigation is resolved. Do it. But, Anna, Raphael looked at me seriously, you need to understand this is going to be a long and costly battle, and there are no guarantees we'll recover all the money. I understand. That afternoon, after Raphael left, I sat with Adrian in my backyard. It was the same place where he had played as a child, where he had thrown footballs with me before life got so complicated. Adrian, I want you to understand the seriousness of what's happening. I understand, Mom. I've completely ruined my life. Not just your life, you've also put my financial stability at risk. If I decide to help you, I'm going to have to mortgage this house again, liquidate my retirement savings, possibly work several more years than I had planned. I saw tears forming in his eyes. I can't ask you to do that. You've already sacrificed enough for me. So, what do you propose? I don't know. His voice was barely a whisper. Maybe I should declare bankruptcy, face the legal consequences, start from scratch. It was the first time in years I had heard my son talk about facing real consequences for his actions. It was a small but significant step. "Adrian, I have a different proposal." He looked up with cautious hope. "I'm going to help you, but with very specific, non-negotiable conditions. Whatever they are, Mom. First, you move back into this house immediately. No more fancy apartments until you've paid back every dollar of this debt." "Okay." "Second, you work with me at the garage. You're going to learn what it means to earn money with honest work and physical effort." I saw a flash of the old shame in his eyes, but he controlled it. "Yes, Mom." "Third, every dollar we invest in recovering your money, you will pay back as a loan with interest. This is not a gift." "Understood." "And fourth, no more secrets between us, ever again. I want total transparency in every aspect of your financial and personal life. I promise." I looked at him for a long moment. My son had changed more in these last 48 hours than he had in the last 5 years. The crisis had broken something in him, but maybe it was exactly what needed to be broken. "All right, Adrian, we're going to fight this together." What I didn't tell him was that I had $15 million waiting for me in Miami, and this battle was going to be much less costly for me than he imagined. But first, I needed to be sure that my son had truly learned the lessons life had just taught him in the hardest way possible. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after discovering Adrian's wedding on Facebook, I made the most calculated decision of my life. The time had come to partially reveal my financial situation, but in a way that kept the lesson intact. Adrian had spent the last 2 days working with me at Manny's garage, learning what it meant to come home with dirty hands and sore muscles. It was the first time in years I'd seen him without an elegant suit, dressed in work overalls and stained with motor oil. "Mom," he had said the night before as we ate dinner, "I never realized how physically exhausting your job island. I always thought it was simple." "Simple doesn't mean easy, son." That morning, as we had breakfast in the kitchen, I decided it was time for the next step in my plan. "Adrian, I have something to tell you." He looked up from his coffee with that permanent expression of anxiety he had developed since this crisis began. "After your father died, I started saving money very disciplinedly, not for myself, but thinking about the future, about family emergencies." "What are you talking about, Mom?" I got up and went to my room, returning with a folder I had prepared the night before. Inside were bank documents showing a savings account with a balance of $400,000. Of course, it was just a small fraction of the real inheritance, but I had transferred that amount from Miami to make my story believable. "For 11 years, son, I've been setting aside between $500 and $1,000 a month, living austerely, without luxuries, mending my clothes instead of buying new ones, driving the same car for a decade." Adrian looked at the documents in total disbelief. "Mom, is this $400,000? Every dollar earned with honest work at the garage, overtime, weekend repairs, night jobs. Manny got me with other garages." "Why did you never tell me anything?" It was a question I had anticipated, and I had my answer carefully prepared. "Because I wanted to see what kind of man you would become without knowing this money existed. I wanted to know if you would visit me out of love, not for financial convenience." I saw my words hit him like a punch to the gut. The realization that he had been acting exactly as I had feared was evident on his face. "My God, Mom, I've been terrible to you." "Yes, you have. But now you have the opportunity to prove that you've really changed." I sat across from him, adopting my most serious tone. "I'm going to use this money to help you, but only under the conditions we discussed. And I want you to understand that this represents 11 years of my life's work." "I can't accept it, Mom. It's your retirement, your security." "Adrian, I've already made the decision, but this is not a gift. It's a family loan with very specific conditions." I pulled out a legal document that Raphael had prepared the day before. It was a detailed family loan agreement with payment terms, interest, and consequences for default. $200,000 will go directly to Raphael to start the international legal proceedings against Patricia and her criminal network. The other $200,000 will be used to negotiate with the banks and establish a payment plan that avoids the seizure of your assets. And the interest? 3% annually, which is less than what the bank was giving me, but more than enough to maintain the value of the money over time. Adrian read the contract carefully. As an accountant, he understood all the legal terms perfectly. This means I'll be paying you back for the next 15 years, assuming I find a job that allows me to generate enough income. Exactly. And during that time, you will live in this house, work honestly, and show me that you've learned the real value of money and work. And if I don't manage to recover the money Patricia stole, then you will pay the full debt with your work. No excuses, no shortcuts, no looking for easy ways to make quick money. I looked him straight in the eye. Adrian, this is your last chance to show me that the son I raised still exists somewhere inside the man you became. He took the pen I offered and signed the contract without hesitation. Thank you, Mom. I won't fail you again. I hope not, son. That afternoon, we went together to Raphael's office to officially start the legal proceedings. My old friend had prepared a comprehensive strategy that included civil lawsuits in the U.S., cooperation with Interpol to locate Patricia, and diplomatic efforts with Argentina and Colombia to facilitate extradition if necessary. Anna, Raphael told me in private while Adrian was signing documents with his assistant, I hope you know what you're getting into. These international cases can take years. I understand perfectly. And the fees you've paid me in advance are a very generous amount. Are you sure you can afford it? Of course I could. I had $15 million waiting for me, but Raphael didn't need to know that. I've been saving for many years specifically for family emergencies like this. You're an extraordinary mother, Anna. Not many women would make this sacrifice for a son who has treated them so poorly. He's my son, Raphael. Despite everything, he's still my son. Over the next 2 weeks, we established a routine we hadn't had since Adrian was a teenager. He would get up at 6 a.m., we would have breakfast together, and then we would go to the garage where he worked as my assistant. At first, Manny and the other mechanics gently teased him. Look, the accountant who doesn't know how to change a spark plug, joked David, the most senior mechanic. But Adrian surprised everyone, including me, with his attitude. Instead of getting offended or acting superior, he asked them to teach him. He stayed after normal hours to practice basic repairs. He asked humble questions about techniques we had been mastering for decades. Your son is really changing, Manny commented to me one afternoon. At first I thought this was temporary, but I see something different in his eyes. What do you see? Genuine humility, respect for manual labor, and above all, a respect for you that he never showed before. It was true. Adrian looked at me differently now, not with the barely disguised shame of previous years, but with something that looked a lot like pride in his mother. One night, while we were having dinner, he asked me a question that surprised me. Mom, why did you never teach me how to work with my hands when I was a kid? I tried several times, but you always preferred to study or play video games, and I thought it was better for you to focus on academic education. I think we both made a mistake. If I had learned the value of physical work from a young age, maybe I wouldn't have disrespected your efforts so much. Maybe, but it's never too late to learn. Mom, there's something else I want to tell you. What is it? I've been thinking a lot about Patricia, about how she tricked me so easily, and I realized it wasn't just about the money. What do you mean? She tricked me because I wanted to be tricked, because I was so desperate to belong to a world I considered superior to ours that I ignored all the warning signs. He fell silent for a moment, playing with the food on his plate. I was ashamed of you, Mom. I was ashamed of our house, of your job, of our humble origins. And that shame made me vulnerable to someone who promised to take me to a better place. And what do you think now? Now I think there's nothing more honorable than a person who works honestly to support their family. That there's nothing superior to a mother who sacrifices everything for her son, even when that son doesn't deserve it. For the first time in years, I saw genuine tears of remorse in Adrian's eyes. Mom, when we get out of this crisis, when I pay my debt to you, I want you to know that I will never again be ashamed of who I am or where I come from. I hope so, son. I hope so. What Adrian didn't know was that his transformation was happening much faster and more profoundly than I had expected, and that soon I would have to make decisions about how much more of the truth he was ready to handle. The $1 million inheritance was still my secret, but with each passing day, it became harder to keep. 3 weeks after starting the legal proceedings, Raphael summoned me to an urgent meeting at his office. His grave expression immediately told me there was important news about Patricia's case. Anna, I have mixed news, he began, spreading several documents across his desk. The good news is that we've located the woman who called herself Patricia. The bad news is that the situation is much more complex than we imagined. Adrian leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped tightly. Where is she? Buenos Aires, Argentina. But here's where it gets complicated. Her real name is Linda Silva, a 32-year-old Colombian citizen with a criminal record in 3 South American countries. Rafael opened a folder containing surveillance photos and official documents. Linda has been running this scam for at least 5 years. We have records of similar victims in Bogotá, Lima, and now in the U.S. Her specialty is successful professional men between 30 and 40. How many victims has she had? I asked. As far as we know, at least 12. And the total amount stolen exceeds $6 million. Adrian visibly paled. So, I'm not the only idiot who fell for her trap. Definitely not. In fact, your case is relatively minor compared to some others. A businessman in Lima lost almost $1.5 million. Rafael continued flipping through the documents. But here's the most interesting part. Linda doesn't work alone. She's part of a sophisticated criminal organization that includes at least 8 people. Does the cousin Daniel really exist? Yes and no. There is a man named Daniel Silva, who turns out to be Linda's real brother, but he's not an investment fund manager in Switzerland. He's an IT specialist who creates the false identities and maintains the digital communications. And the other members of the organization? We've identified a psychologist who specializes in emotional manipulation, an accountant who forges financial documents, and several actors who play different roles as needed for each scam. The scale of the operation was beginning to take shape in my mind. Patricia hadn't just been an opportunistic scammer. She was part of a perfectly organized criminal machine. What are our options for recovering the money? This is where it gets interesting. Rafael smiled for the first time since the meeting began. The Argentine authorities have frozen several bank accounts associated with Linda and her organization. We're talking about approximately $2 million in blocked assets. Does that mean we can recover part of Adrian's money? It's possible, but it will require an international judicial proceeding that could take between 6 months and 2 years, and we need to hire legal representation in Buenos Aires. Adrian looked at me with a worried expression. Mom, that's going to cost a lot more money. I can't let you spend even more of your savings. Let me worry about the finances, son. The question is, are you willing to see this through, knowing it's going to be a long process with no guarantees? Yes. Not just for me, but for the other victims too. These people can't get away with ruining lives. Rafael nodded approvingly. That's exactly the attitude we need, because I have a proposal that could benefit everyone involved. He pulled out another set of documents. The authorities of 3 countries are coordinating a joint operation against this organization. If we agree to fully cooperate with the investigation, our case gets priority, and we significantly reduce legal costs. What kind of cooperation? Adrian would have to travel to Buenos Aires to testify before the Argentine authorities. We would also need full access to all his communications with Linda, his bank accounts, and any additional evidence he might have. Is it dangerous? I asked, my maternal instincts kicking in immediately. Minimally. Linda and her organization are not violent. They are sophisticated scammers, not violent criminals. But it does mean Adrian would be out of the country for at least a week. I looked at my son, who seemed to be carefully processing all the information. What do you think, Adrian? I think I have to do it. I not only have a responsibility to try to recover the money they stole from me, but also to help stop these people from harming others. Then it's settled. Rafael, proceed with the arrangements. Perfect. But there's one more detail I need to discuss with you in private, Anna. Rafael motioned for Adrian to go to the waiting room. Could you give us a few minutes? Once we were alone, Rafael looked at me with an expression I knew well from our years of friendship. Anna, I need to ask you a direct question. Where is all this money really coming from? I told you I had savings. $400,000 in savings for a mechanic was already surprising. But now you're talking about financing international legal proceedings that will cost at least another $100,000. It doesn't add up with your historical income. I was silent for a moment, weighing how much I could reveal to my old friend without compromising my plan with Adrian. Rafael, trust me when I say I have the necessary resources to see this case through to the end. Did you win the lottery or something? Something like that. Rafael studied me for a long moment. All right. I won't press you anymore. But I want you to know that as your lawyer and your friend, I'm here for anything you need. I appreciate that, Rafael. I really do. That night, as Adrian and I had dinner, I decided to tell him about the day's developments and prepare him for what was to come. Son, this trip to Buenos Aires is going to be crucial for our case, but it's also going to be the first time you really face someone who betrayed you so deeply. I've been thinking about it all day, Mom. I have mixed feelings about seeing Linda again. What kind of feelings? Anger, obviously, but also curiosity. I want to understand how someone can do what she did. How she can look a person in the eye, build an intimate relationship, and at the same time be planning to destroy their life. There are people in this world who completely lack empathy, Adrian. For them, other people are just resources to be exploited. Do you think she ever felt anything real for me? It was a painful question, but an important one for his healing process. Honestly, I don't know. But what I do know is that her actions show that if there were any genuine feelings, they weren't enough to stop her from robbing you and destroying your life. You're right, and that's what hurts the most, not just the money, but realizing I was completely deceived about something I thought was love. Real love, son, is shown through consistent actions over time, not with romantic words and promises of easy wealth. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. Like the love you've shown me, even when I didn't deserve it. Exactly. Mom, there's something I want to tell you before I travel to Argentina. What is it? These last 2 months, working with you at the garage, living in this house again, they have been the happiest I've been in years. I was surprised to hear that. Really? Yes. All those years chasing a sophisticated life, trying to impress people who didn't really know or care about me, I felt constantly empty, like I was playing a role that wasn't really me. And now? Now I feel authentic for the first time in a long time. I work honestly, I live modestly, and I have a real relationship with my mother. It's strange, but I feel more successful now than when I was making 3 times as much money. His words moved me deeply. My plan was working better than I had hoped, but I was also beginning to feel the burden of keeping the secret about the inheritance. Adrian, when we get back from Buenos Aires, I think it will be time to have some very important conversations about our future. What kind of conversations? About what we really want from life, about what success means, and about how we're going to permanently rebuild our relationship. I'm ready for those conversations, Mom. More ready than I've ever been. What Adrian didn't know was that those conversations would include the revelation of $15 million and decisions that would change our lives forever. But first, he had to prove his strength by confronting the woman who had destroyed his world. The flight to Buenos Aires took off on June 15th, 2023, exactly 2 months after this nightmare had begun. I accompanied Adrian to the airport, observing how he had changed during these weeks. He was no longer the arrogant, ashamed man he had been. He walked with a quiet determination, wearing simple but dignified clothes. "Mom, thank you for making this possible," he said as we waited for his flight. "Thank you for having the courage to do it, son." During the 5 days Adrian was in Argentina, we kept in daily contact. He told me about the meetings with the prosecutors, the interrogations with the international police, and the surreal experience of seeing Linda Silva in person for the first time since her disappearance. "Mom, it was chilling," he told me during a video call from his hotel in Buenos Aires. "The woman I knew as Patricia simply doesn't exist. Linda is completely different. Colder, calculating, without any trace of the warm personality I fell in love with. How did you feel seeing her?" "Pure anger at first, but then something strange happened. I started to feel sorry for her." "Sorry for her?" "Yes." The prosecutors explained her history to me. Linda grew up in extreme poverty in Colombia, lost her parents at a young age, and started these scams as a way to survive, which then became her only way of life. That doesn't justify what she did to you, Adrian. Of course not, but it helped me understand that her betrayal wasn't personal. I was just a target, not a real person to her. It was exactly the kind of mature perspective I hoped he would develop through this experience. And what about the other members of the organization? They are cooperating fully with the authorities. Apparently, Linda was the leader of the group, and the others are willing to testify against her in exchange for reduced sentences. On the last day of his stay in Buenos Aires, Adrian called me with news that would change everything. "Mom, I have incredible news. The prosecutors have managed to locate and freeze bank accounts with a total of $180,000 that can be directly linked to my case." "Does that mean you're going to get that money back?" "Yes, but it's going to take a few more months to complete all the legal procedures." And there's more. Linda has agreed to cooperate fully with the international authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. What does that mean exactly? It means she's going to provide information on all her victims and help recover as much money as possible. The prosecutors believe we could see additional recoveries over the next few years. It was fantastic news, but I knew that $180,000, while significant, wouldn't completely solve Adrian's financial crisis. He would still have to deal with over $600,000 in bank debt. However, his return to Chicago marked an important emotional turning point. Adrian had confronted his betrayer, contributed to a larger justice process, and demonstrated a maturity I hadn't seen in years. The night of his return, as we had dinner in our family kitchen, I decided it was time to start gradually revealing the truth about my financial situation. Adrian, while you were in Buenos Aires, I made some important decisions about our future. What kind of decisions? I've been reflecting a lot on what I really want to do with the rest of my life. I'm 63 years old. I've worked for 45 years, and for the first time in decades, I have my son back home. Mom, I hope you're not thinking of working more years than necessary because of me. Actually, I'm thinking the opposite. I pulled out several documents I had prepared during his absence. They included preliminary business plans, market studies, and financial projections. What is all this? A family business proposal. Adrian, what would you think if I told you I want us to open our own accounting consulting firm? His expression was one of complete surprise. Mom, that would require a huge initial investment. Offices, equipment, software, staff. Let me worry about the initial financing. The question is, are you interested in the idea? I would love to work with you, but I don't understand how we could finance something like that. Adrian, during these 2 months you've been living here, I've seen how you've changed. You've shown humility, hard work, and above all, you've shown that you can be trustworthy again. I got up and went to my room, returning with another folder containing additional bank account documents. Son, I haven't told you the whole truth about my financial situation. His face tensed immediately. What do you mean? The $400,000 I showed you 2 months ago isn't all my savings. It's just a part. I opened the folder and showed him statements showing a total of $1,200,000 in various accounts. Mom, how is this possible? Where did so much money come from? It was time to partially reveal the truth about my brother Charles's inheritance, but without revealing the full amount yet. Do you remember I mentioned that my brother Charles had moved to the United States over 20 years ago? Yes, vaguely. You lost touch. Charles died on April 8th of this year, the same day as your wedding. He left me an inheritance that completely changed my financial situation. How much money did he leave you? Enough for us to start a new life together, without the financial worries that have defined our relationship for years. Adrian was silent for several minutes, processing this information. Mom, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I needed to know if you had really learned the lessons life had just taught you. I needed to see if you could genuinely change, not just because you had access to easy money. And what have you concluded? That my son has come back. The man who went to Buenos Aires to face his past, who has worked honestly at the garage for 2 months, who has shown genuine humility and remorse, that is the son I remembered. He came over and hugged me with an intensity I hadn't felt since he was a child. Mom, I'm so sorry for all the years I wasted being arrogant and ungrateful. Those years brought us here, son. Without them, maybe we never would have learned what really matters. So you really want us to be partners? More than anything in the world, but as equal partners, Adrian. Not as mother and son, where one commands and the other obeys, as 2 adult men building something together. And my debts with the banks? We will resolve them completely. Between the money you'll recover from Linda and the resources I have available, we can clear your entire financial past and start completely fresh. I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, son. But there's one final condition that is non-negotiable. What is it? No more secrets between us. Total transparency in everything. Finances, business decisions, personal relationships, everything. I promise, Mom. Never again. What Adrian still didn't know was that I was still hiding the biggest part of the truth from him. $1,200,000 was a life-changing amount, but it was nothing compared to the $15 million I actually had available. But I had decided to reveal the full truth gradually, making sure each revelation was accompanied by lessons learned and demonstrated personal growth. The next phase of my plan would involve showing him what we could achieve together, and then, when I was completely sure of his transformation, I would reveal the full extent of our possibilities. For the first time in years, I had real hope that we could build not only a successful business, but also a mother-son relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. Charles's inheritance had made this second chance possible, but the hard work of both of us would make it a reality. Over the next few weeks, Adrian and I dove completely into planning our new business. It was fascinating to see my son apply his professional experience with a humility and dedication he had never shown before. Every morning we'd have breakfast together, reviewing business plans, and every night we'd have dinner discussing strategies and projections. On July 20th, 2023, we received official confirmation that the $180,000 had been transferred from Argentina to a blocked account in Chicago, pending the final legal procedures. It was real, tangible money that validated the whole process we had gone through. "Mom, I can't believe we actually recovered some of the money," Adrian said, reviewing the bank documents Raphael had given us that morning. "It's just the beginning, son. Linda is going to continue cooperating with the authorities over the next few months. Raphael thinks we could see additional recoveries. But even if we don't recover another dollar, this money, combined with what you've loaned me, allows me to get out of the most critical situation with the banks." It was true. With the $180,000 recovered and the $400,000 I had officially loaned him, Adrian could negotiate payment agreements that would avoid foreclosure and allow him to gradually rebuild his credit. However, I knew the time had come for the final revelation. During these weeks of working together, Adrian had consistently proven that his transformation was genuine and lasting. He was no longer the arrogant man ashamed of his origins, but someone who had learned to value honest work and authentic relationships. That night after dinner, I made the most important decision of this entire process. "Adrian, we need to talk about something very serious. Is there a problem with the business?" "No, it's something much more important than that." I went to my room and returned with a folder I had kept hidden all these months. It contained all the original documents from my brother Charles's inheritance, including the complete account statements from the Miami accounts. "Son, all these months, I haven't told you the whole truth about your Uncle Charles's inheritance." His expression immediately turned cautious. "What do you mean?" "The money I've been using to help you, to finance the legal proceedings, to plan our business, it doesn't come from a lifetime of savings." I opened the folder and pulled out the main document, the certificate of inheritance showing the total value of Charles's estate. "Adrian, your Uncle Charles left me $15 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian stared at the document as if it were an alien object he couldn't fully process. "Can's $1 million? $15 million in cash, properties, and investments in Florida." "Mom, are you telling me you're a multi-millionaire?" "Yes, son. Since April 15th, the day of your wedding, I am." Adrian got up from the sofa and started pacing the living room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of total disbelief. I can't process it." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to know who you really were when you had nothing. I needed to know if the son I had raised with so much sacrifice still existed underneath all the years of arrogance and shame." "Oh my God, Mom. All these months working in the garage, worrying about paying you back, feeling guilty about the expenses you were incurring, were exactly what you needed to experience, and what I needed to see." He sat down again, but on the edge of the sofa, completely tense. "What have you concluded after all this test?" "I've concluded that my son has come back. The man who went to Buenos Aires to face his past, who worked humbly with me for months, who showed genuine remorse and real change. That is the son I always believed in." "And what does this mean for us now?" It was the question I had been waiting for months. "It means we can build something extraordinary together. Not just a small consulting business, but something that truly makes a difference." I pulled out another set of documents from the folder, expanded business plans I had been developing in secret. "Adrian, with $15 million, we can create a financial consulting firm that helps small and medium-sized businesses. We can establish a scholarship fund for students from working-class families. We can do everything I ever dreamed of but never had the resources to achieve. As equal partners? As equal partners. 50-50 inches everything." "Mom, I can't accept that." "It's your money, your inheritance." "Adrian, what good is money if I can't share it with the most important person in my life?" He was quiet for several minutes, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. "Mom, All these months I've been learning to value things I used to look down on. Honest work, a simple life, authentic relationships. I know, son, I've seen it. And now you're telling me we could have a completely different life. Luxury, comforts, everything I once thought I wanted. And does that scare you? Yes. It terrifies me. I'm afraid of becoming that arrogant person I was before. His answer confirmed everything I needed to know about his transformation. Adrian, the fact that it scares you proves exactly why I can trust you with this responsibility. What do you mean? The man you were 6 months ago would have seen this money as an opportunity to impress others, to buy social status, to distance himself from his humble origins. You're right. But the man you are now sees the money as a responsibility, as an opportunity to help others, to build something meaningful. Mom, if we do this together, I want us to set some very clear rules. What kind of rules? We can never use this money to impress others or to buy social respect. We must live modestly, work honestly, and use the wealth to create opportunities for other people. I completely agree. And if I ever start showing signs of arrogance or being ashamed of our origins again, you have to promise me you'll confront me immediately. I promise, son. And can we keep living in this house? At least for now, while I get used to this new reality. This house has been our home for decades. I see no reason to change that. Adrian came over and hugged me with an intensity that held years of complex emotions. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing something in me that I myself had lost. Thank you for proving it was worth the wait. When do we start? Tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do. That night, for the first time in months, we both slept soundly. We had reached the end of a long and painful journey, but also the beginning of something completely new. Charles's inheritance had made this transformation possible, but the real treasure we had recovered was our mother-son relationship, now built on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and shared values. The next day, we would begin to build not just a business, but a legacy that would honor both Charles's memory and the sacrifices that had defined our lives up to that point. $15 million was a life-changing sum, but getting my son back was priceless. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity that transformed our lives in ways we never could have imagined. On August 1st, 2023, we officially launched Ruiz & Associates, Financial Consulting, with modest but professional offices in a Chicago business district. Adrian showed a capacity for leadership and business vision that constantly surprised me. He had taken the lessons of humility he learned during his crisis and transformed them into a business philosophy focused on helping family-owned businesses and independent workers manage their finances responsibly. Mom, I want our first client to be someone who really needs help, not a big corporation that can pay us high fees, he had told me during our first weeks of operation. Who are you thinking of? Manny. Manny, my old boss from the garage, had been struggling for years with the financial administration of his small business. Tax regulations, insurance, employee management, all of it constantly overwhelmed him. That's perfect, Adrian. Manny trusts us, he knows our values, and he can really benefit from our services. Our first project was to completely reorganize the finances of Manny's garage. Adrian applied his accounting expertise with a patience and dedication that filled me with pride. There was no trace of the professional arrogance he had shown in his previous jobs. Anna, your son has completely changed, Manny commented to me after our first few weeks working together. Before, when he came to the garage, you could tell he felt superior to us. Now he works with us like we're equals. That's because he finally understands that we are equals, I replied. During the fall of 2023, our business grew organically through referrals. Every client we helped recommended us to other small business owners, self-employed workers, families who needed basic financial planning. We deliberately kept our fees low, focusing on volume and social impact rather than maximizing profits. But the most significant moment came in October, when Adrian proposed something that would definitively prove his complete transformation. Mom, I've been thinking about something for weeks. What is it? I want to create a university scholarship fund for the children of manual laborers. Mechanics, electricians, plumbers, construction workers. People like you who never had educational opportunities, but whose children could benefit from them. The proposal moved me deeply. It was exactly the kind of initiative I would have expected from my son if he had maintained the values I had raised him with. How much are you thinking of investing? $2 million initially. enough to award 100 full scholarships of $20,000 each. Adrian, that's a huge amount. Mom, we have $15 million. We can afford to be generous with causes that really matter. And how would we manage such a fund? I've been researching. We can establish a nonprofit foundation with very specific selection criteria and a follow-up process to ensure the beneficiaries really take advantage of the opportunities. Over the next few weeks, we worked together to design the statutes of the Charles Ruiz Foundation in honor of my brother, whose inheritance had made all this possible. The selection criteria were clear: students with academic excellence whose parents were manual laborers with family incomes below a certain threshold. The official launch of the foundation took place on December 15, 2023, exactly 8 months after Adrian had arrived crying at my house with that yellow envelope. We organized a modest event in a community hall, inviting working-class families, representatives from local high schools, and media specialized in education. Adrian spoke before the audience with an eloquence and passion that filled me with maternal pride. My mother worked for decades as a mechanic to pay for my university education, he began. For years I was ashamed of that sacrifice. I thought my university degree made me superior to her and people like her. He paused, looking directly at me from the podium. I was completely wrong. My mother and workers like her are the backbone of our society. They build, repair, and maintain the world that the rest of us take for granted. Their children deserve the same educational opportunities that I had, but financed with dignity, not with the kind of exhausting sacrifices my mother had to make. The ovation that followed was genuine and emotional. I saw tears in the eyes of several parents present, men and women who recognized their own struggles in my son's words. After the event, as we were packing up, Adrian asked me a question I had been waiting for months. Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of what we've built? Son, your father would be ecstatic, not just for the financial success, but for seeing the man you've become. There's something else I want to do. What is it? I want to publicly apologize to you for all the years I treated you badly, for being ashamed of you, for excluding you from my wedding. Adrian, that's not necessary. Yes, Island, not just for you, but for me. I need to completely close that chapter of my life. A week later, Adrian organized a small family celebration. He invited Raphael, Manny, and his family, several of our clients who had become friends, and the mechanics from the garage who had witnessed his transformation. During dinner, he stood up to make a toast that no one expected. I want to take this opportunity to do something I should have done years ago, he began. Mom, for most of my adult life, I treated you in a way that I am deeply ashamed of. I was ashamed of your job, of our modest home, of our humble origins. The room fell completely silent. The lowest point was when I got married without inviting you because I felt your presence didn't fit with the sophisticated image I wanted to project. I saw tears forming in his eyes as he continued. It turns out that the woman for whom I rejected you was a con artist who nearly destroyed my life. Meanwhile, you, the woman I was ashamed of, sacrificed everything to save me. He walked over to me and handed me an envelope I recognized immediately. It was just like the yellow envelope he had brought the night he arrived desperate at my house. But this time, it contained something different. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 documents: the first loan agreement he had signed with me, marked as canceled, paid in full, and a certificate naming him as my official 50% partner in all our business ventures. Mom, you are not just my mother. You are my hero, my partner, and my best friend. Forgive me for taking so long to realize it. The ovation was spontaneous and emotional, but the most important thing for me was to see the expression on Adrian's face: complete peace, total authenticity, and the kind of happiness that only comes from living in accordance with your deepest values. That night, after everyone had left, we sat in our backyard with 2 beers. Mom, I have a confession to make. What is it? These last 8 months have been the happiest of my life. Not because of the money, but because of having a real relationship with you. For me too, son. Do you think we've learned enough for the money not to change us? I think it has already changed us, but in the right way. What do you mean? It changed us because it gave us the opportunity to discover who we really are when we don't have to worry about basic survival, and it turns out we're good people who want to help others. I hope you're right. I am, Adrian. I am. As we looked at the stars that night, I knew we had achieved something that money alone could never buy. a mother-son relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and unconditional love. Charles's inheritance had been the catalyst, but the real treasure was what we had built together. Today is April 15th, 2024, exactly 1 year after that day that changed our lives forever. As I write these lines from my office at Ruiz & Associates, I watch through the window as Adrian leads a meeting with a family of immigrants who need help formalizing their small catering business. The transformation has been so profound that sometimes I find it hard to believe he's the same person who, a year ago, was ashamed to invite me to his wedding. Early this morning we went together to the cemetery to visit Mark's grave. It's a tradition we've established. Every April 15th, the anniversary of my inheritance and his secret wedding, we go to tell his father everything that has happened in our lives. "Dad," Adrian said as he placed fresh flowers on the headstone, "this year has been incredible. Mom and I have built something beautiful together, something I know you'd be proud of." I remained silent, listening to my son speak to his father with a tenderness he hadn't shown in years. Last month, we awarded the first 50 scholarships from the Charles Ruiz Foundation. You should have seen some of those kids, Dad. Their eyes shone just like mine did when Mom paid for my university. But this time it's different, because these kids will never be ashamed of their hard-working parents. Over this year, our company has grown steadily but controlled. We have 17 employees, all specialists in helping small family businesses and independent workers. Our annual revenue already exceeds $800,000, but we continue to reinvest most of it in responsible expansion and social projects. Adrian developed a revolutionary program we call Integral Mentorship. We not only offer accounting and financial services, but we also pair successful entrepreneurs with working-class families who want to start their own businesses. I myself mentor 3 families who are setting up mechanic shops in rural towns where these services are needed. "Anna, your son has created something special here," Elena, the director of the Chamber of Commerce, told me yesterday during a meeting about small businesses. I don't know any other consultancy that combines technical expertise with real social commitment. But the most profound changes have been personal. Adrian finally moved out of our house in February, but not to a luxurious apartment downtown. He chose a simple 2-bedroom apartment in a regular suburb, 15 minutes from our office and 20 minutes from my house. "I want my own space," he explained, "but I also want to keep our Sunday dinners and our Monday work breakfasts." In March, he met Sarah, a 2-year-old elementary school teacher who works in a public school. She is a completely different woman from Patricia, authentic, humble, committed to her work, and someone who genuinely values a person's character over their economic status. "Mom, Sarah didn't even know we were financially successful when we started dating," Adrian told me a few weeks ago. "She just thought we were 2 accountants who worked with working-class families." "And when did you tell her?" "After 2 months of dating, when she realized our social projects were too big for a small consultancy. Her reaction was perfect." "What did she do?" "She worried that the money might change me, exactly as I worried when you revealed the inheritance to me. It's confirmation that I chose right this time." Last Sunday, Sarah came to dinner at the house for the first time. The 3 of us cooked a traditional paella together, and as we were preparing it, she asked me a question that moved me deeply. "Anna, Adrian has told me the story of his transformation over the past year. Did you really hide $15 million from him to teach him a lesson?" "I didn't hide it to punish him," I explained as I chopped vegetables. "I hid it to save him." "What do you mean?" "My son was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone for whom people were valuable only for their social status. If I had given him immediate access to that fortune, it would have reinforced the very values that were destroying him." "And weren't you afraid the lesson would be too harsh?" "Of course I was afraid, but I was more afraid of losing him forever." Sarah looked at me with an expression of deep respect. "You are an extraordinary mother." "I'm an imperfect mother who had to make some very difficult decisions." That night, after Sarah left, Adrian and I stayed up late chatting in the backyard. "Mom, do you ever regret the way you handled the whole situation with Patricia and the inheritance?" "What do you think?" "I think it was the wisest decision you could have made." "Why?" "Because if you had rescued me immediately when I came crying with that yellow envelope, I would have learned that there would always be someone to bail me out of my problems. I would have remained the same arrogant and irresponsible man." "And what have you learned now?" "I've learned that consequences are powerful teachers. I've learned that honest work gives a satisfaction that easy money can never provide. And I've learned that authentic relationships are more valuable than any social status. I was silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of his reflection. Adrian, there's something I've never told you about why I decided to help you. What is it? It wasn't just because you're my son. It was because I saw glimpses of the boy I had raised during those first conversations after the crisis. What glimpses? Your willingness to work at the garage without complaining. Your ability to genuinely admit your mistakes. Your readiness to face real consequences for your actions. And if you hadn't seen those glimpses, honestly, I don't know. Maybe I would have waited longer before revealing the inheritance. Maybe I would have set even stricter conditions. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for proving it was worth not giving up. Now, a year later, as I watch my son work with the same dedication and humility he learned during his crisis, I know we made the right decisions. Charles's inheritance not only gave us financial security, it gave us the opportunity to discover what kind of people we really were when the external pressures were removed. Ruiz and Associates has become more than a business. It's a legacy of values that we hope to pass on to future generations. The Charles Ruiz Foundation has already changed the lives of 50 working-class families. And our mother-son relationship has become the model I hope Adrian will one day replicate with his own children. This afternoon, Adrian and Sarah are going to announce their engagement. It will be a small, intimate wedding, exactly the opposite of the ostentatious celebration he organized with Patricia. And of course I will be in the front row, proud not only to be his mother, but to be his friend and partner. The final irony is perfect. The day my son rejected me for not being good enough for his new life, I became a millionaire. But the real treasure wasn't the $15 million from Charles. The real treasure was getting my son back. If you enjoyed this story, please support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box that appears on the left. Thank you for joining us.